Headline News, I'm David Goodnow. President Reagan said there is reason both for hope and optimism. He and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev ended their three-day summit Thursday, and although both leaders admit there were no shocking breakthroughs during the talks, they're promising to forge ahead. Charles Bierbauer has details.
As they prepared to part, President Reagan said he and the General Secretary can walk away with a sense of accomplishment.
The INF Treaty, as proud of it as we are, should be viewed as a beginning, not an end. Further arms reduction is now possible. I'm pleased some progress has been made toward a strategic arms reduction treaty over the last 3 days.
The two leaders told their arms negotiators to get cracking on a treaty cutting the huge strategic nuclear arsenals in half. They'd like to sign that in Moscow in mid-'88. They have finessed for the moment the difficulties of President Reagan's strategic defense by calling for a commitment to the ABM treaty that accommodates Star Wars development and testing.
I made it clear that our SDI program will continue, and that when we have a defense ready to deploy, we will do so.
Beyond arms control, the talks were less successful. The 8-year Soviet occupation of Afghanistan was not resolved.
We can name the beginning of the withdrawal of Soviet forces, but this must at the same time become the start, the beginning of an end to arms and financial supplies to the insurgency forces.
There was some very limited movement. Resolution of a number of individual cases in which prisoners will be released or exit visas granted.
Frequent Reagan critics are not so now.
I'm disappointed that more didn't come out of the summit. I would have hoped that the summit would have addressed itself to the issue of human rights, to the issue of the captive nations and the desire of those to be free, to the issue of the Afghanistan and Angola, Nicaragua.
In his 3 days in the United States, Gorbachev never got beyond Washington, his sightseeing limited to a stroll through the White House grounds. The two leaders are struggling with old fears, but seem nevertheless comfortable with each other. In the end, Gorbachev said he believes he and the president trust each other. Reagan said there is reason for hope and optimism. The long faces of Reykjavik have not been seen here, and the two leaders expect to meet again in Moscow. Charles Bierbauer, CNN, the White House.
That summit has apparently caused a delay in a test of the Navy's new Trident II missile. An unnamed official said Thursday's test was canceled because it was feared it might be embarrassing while Gorbachev was still here. The official said the test is now being rescheduled for Friday. Secretary of State George Shultz is on his way to Europe. His first stop is Brussels, where he will brief the NATO allies on the summit. Most of the missiles scrapped by way of the INF treaty are based on European soil. NATO defense ministers have expressed support for the treaty. Shultz will also visit leaders in Bonn, Oslo, Copenhagen, and London. Also en route to Europe is Mikhail Gorbachev. Before going home, he will stop in East Berlin to brief the Warsaw Pact on his talks with Ronald Reagan. Anthony Collins has more on what reaction may be behind the Iron Curtain.
He wanted to reach out to the American people, and he did.
I want to say hello to you.
An impromptu stop en route to the White House apparently surprised Vice President Bush, but it symbolized Gorbachev's determination to achieve one of his goals in the United States, winning friends and influencing people.
The guy is a PR genius. I mean, jumping out of the car like that. Unbelievable.
We went out of the cars and we went up to a group of Americans, and I could feel their sentiments. I could feel their... And I said to them, look, that's what we're talking with the president about, how to come closer to each other, how to improve our cooperation.
Further evidence of his success in this area, the crowd's response at the White House when he said he's not done yet trying to make contact.
In bidding farewell to America, I am looking forward to a new encounter with it, in the hope that I will then be able to see not only its capital, but also to meet face to face with its great people, to chat and to have some lively exchanges with ordinary Americans.
But in other areas, Gorbachev did not immediately achieve all he wanted, including his ambitious plans for drastic cuts in long-range nuclear missiles.
In our talks with President Ronald Reagan, some headway has been made on the central issue of that process, achieving substantial reductions of strategic offensive arms, which are the most potent weapons in the world. Although we still have a lot of work to do.
Still another Gorbachev goal, increased trade to help his country's sick economy. He tried to sell business deals to leading American industrial and commercial figures, but it will take time to see whether he persuaded them. Before his departure, Gorbachev said he wants America to be more tolerant of the Soviet Union and not to think of his people in stereotypes. Whatever else he may or may not have achieved, Mikhail Gorbachev did leave behind him in the United States a more favorable public image of the Soviet leader. Anthony Collins, CNN, Washington.
The summit so moved a Moscow couple they named their new twin sons, Ronald and Mikhail. The children were born Tuesday in Moscow as the two leaders were signing the arms treaty in Washington. A Soviet newspaper reports both mother and children are doing well. If Mr. Gorbachev's actions are stealing the summit limelight, he shares the spot with his wife. Thursday afternoon, Raisa Gorbachev won the hearts and minds of some very prominent American women. Patricia Ox reports.
The elusive Soviet First Lady, Raisa Gorbachev, finally walked over to address an impatient crowd of news-hungry journalists.
Good morning.
Mrs. Gorbachev had met with a small group of influential American women at the home of Pamela Harriman, widow of former ambassador to the Soviet Union, Averil Harriman. They talked of women's role in society and of bilateral exchanges in culture and medicine. She had personal things to say to each invited guest.
Obviously, I think she feels there's a very important role for women to play. There are not very many women, very few women who are at the top levels in the Soviet Union. So we did talk briefly about that. But
Mrs. Gorbachev absolutely warmed my heart, I think, by indicating that she thought that the job that I have, which is that of university president, was a job of great power.
It was superpower politics that brought Raisa Gorbachev to Washington, a point she emphasized in her parting words.
Well, the visit of the General Secretary to the United States and his meetings and his conversations with the President and the signing of the treaty,
Дорогие друзья, это наш общий с вами праздник.
That, my friends, is a holiday for our both nations.
Это общий праздник.
That is the thing that our both nations can celebrate together.
Senator Barbara Mikulski spoke of her as a very stately person, one she'd like to get to know better.
Well, you know, you never know when you need a friend at the Kremlin.
Raisa Gorbachev will return to Moscow having served an important diplomatic role in selling the Soviet Union to the United States, even if she is likely to raise eyebrows back home for sharing her husband's glory. Patricia Ox, CNN, Washington.
After getting off to a flying start this week, the stock market is once again struggling to find some direction. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted more than 47 points Thursday after a dismal report on the October trade deficit. A San Francisco man said followers of the Reverend Sun Myung Moon's Unification Church are lying in the name of God. Greg Lefebvre reports on the lawsuit, a case with religious and constitutional overtones.
Does the U.S. Constitution protect followers of the Reverend Sun Myung Moon's Unification Church if they lie about their religion in order to get other people to join? The lawyers representing a San Francisco law student say no. They've asked the California Supreme Court for a chance to press their case. A lower court threw out the matter, saying the First Amendment protection of freedom of religious expression allows lying in the name of God. Attorney Ford Green disagrees.
The Unification Church does not have a right to lie to people in order to remove and separate them and put them in a rigged, isolated environment and brainwash them and then disclose their identity to them. And that's what happened here.
Former members say recruiters for the Unification Church repeatedly denied their church affiliation until after the law student had been brainwashed in the church's beliefs.
We can't have any freedom of religion if you don't have freedom of thought. And as soon as people take that right away from anyone, the state must come in.
We did not challenge their allegations that false statements were made.
The church acknowledges the deception but says it renounced the practice 8 years ago.
The same story projected over and over again by the media created the myth of this strange group saying deceptive things. But it was not true. It is not true.
Neil Maxwell says he has deprogrammed, that is, unconverted, about 1,000 church members.
They have two primary purposes. One is power and the other is money. And they're after young people that can run out on the streets and sell roses for them and make money.
Constitutional law professor Jesse Choper says the government imposes strict limits on religion.
Freedom of religious exercise is not absolutely protected. If it were, then someone could engage in human sacrifice in the name of religion and be immune from prosecution.
This case will likely affect other religions more. The Unification Church says it's won every deceptive practice suit against it. Hundreds of similar cases, though, against other faiths are still in the courts. Greg Lefebvre, CNN, San Francisco.
7 hooded gunmen seized nearly 100 hostages during a bank robbery in Brazil Thursday. Police surrounded the bank and a shootout ensued, but the robbers won their demand for a bus and safe passage for themselves and 12 hostages. They escaped with the equivalent of almost $1.5 million. 2 British convicts took a literal flight to freedom Thursday. When a helicopter touched down near England's Gartree prison, inmates Sidney Draper and John Kendall climbed on board. The pilot was apparently not involved in the escape scheme. When he landed 3 miles away, the prisoners got out, hijacking a car. They remain at large. Roman Catholic bishops in the United States say they will tolerate educational programs in condom use as a way to prevent AIDS. Acknowledging that some Catholics don't adhere to the Church's teachings on sexuality, the bishops say those people should be informed about ways to prevent AIDS. The Church's new stance is drawing mixed reaction.
There is one great disadvantage with the use of condoms. It is mortally sinful. And the bishops should be ashamed of themselves for recommending this.
It's a very good, pastoral, solid response to the people with AIDS.
The statement also condemned discrimination against homosexuals and AIDS victims. Faculty members and students at medical schools in New York State can no longer refuse to treat AIDS patients. Tim Eulinger reports the alternative is now dismissal.
Any doctor, resident, or student affiliated with the New York State Medical School who refuses to treat an AIDS patient faces dismissal. The new policy is being hailed as a major advance by advocates for AIDS patients.
The message is real clear that no individual, no person, no population is expendable in the face of this epidemic.
New York's Harlem Hospital treats 50 AIDS patients a day. Doctors here say the new policy will serve as an example for other places where AIDS is not yet a big problem.
Many states have very few AIDS patients, and it's important to have this philosophy stated right out in front that we must manage AIDS patients in an identical fashion to other patients.
But doctors who work with AIDS patients do face a small risk of contracting AIDS from infected blood. Dr. Ronald Abel is a heart surgeon who has operated on AIDS patients, but has chosen not to operate on some whose conditions he felt were irreversible.
Some surgeons, I have heard, will refuse to treat anybody who is infected with the AIDS virus. I've heard that some dentists will absolutely refuse to treat a patient who is known to be infected with the AIDS virus. I think that's wrong.
These medical students also said it's wrong.
However, when it comes to something like a surgeon, where you're obligated at every turn to put your hands into really what is the ultimate risk, I can't imagine that it wouldn't be scary.
But scary or not, many doctors who are in favor of the new policy say risk is part of a doctor's job, and always has been.
Smallpox was an excellent example. Before we had anti-tuberculous drugs, tuberculosis was another example of a disorder which was possibly fatal if contracted by those individuals who were providing the treatment.
AIDS experts say the decision by the New York State medical schools is an important step in showing the public that discrimination against AIDS patients will not be tolerated. Tim Eulinger, CNN, New York.
There are no easy answers to the riddles that plague the nuclear age. Is deterrence maintained even as numbers of missiles are reduced? Is trust really an issue at the negotiating table? In the final segment of our series, correspondent Ralph Begleiter looks at where we've been and where we're going in the battle for peace.
Those missiles are there, and it's just like an evil thorn or something in the world.
Parce qu'on pourrait mourir. You could die. You could lose your family. You could find yourself all alone.
It's just like there's somebody besides God and myself that is trying to master my fate, you know? Everybody's.
The children know it. The nuclear age confronts the world with an awesome challenge to control the weapons modern science has created.
The genie is out of the bottle.
Nuclear weapons cannot be uninvented.
The superpower leaders signing an agreement to do away with a tiny fraction of their nuclear arsenals have yet to confront many tougher arms control issues, such as destroying the more powerful and dangerous long-range missiles.
I think that we're going to have a meeting in Moscow, and I think there is a reasonably good chance that we will make another gigantic step forward in the elimination of nuclear weapons.
We're wasting a hell of a lot of time talking about reduction in numbers of missiles or warheads. This is irrelevant stuff. It's kid stuff. You don't make the world safer by taking 1,000 nuclear warheads out and destroying them. Not a bit.
The question is not how to rid the world of nuclear weapons. If nuclear weapons are such a strong deterrent that they manage to rid the world of war, that is much more important. What I am seeking is a Europe and a world with peace.
The U.S. and Soviets must compromise on their dispute over space-based weapon systems before any new missile agreements are reached. Making any new agreement work involves visiting top-secret defense facilities to prevent cheating, one way to establish some trust between the superpowers.
We have lived, certainly in the last 10 years, almost as if we were in a state of war with the Soviet Union.
If we finally could come to a point where we trust each other more and not stick to old-fashioned ideological ideas of communism and anti-communism, we might get forward.
I certainly would not make an agreement with the Soviet Union because I trust them. I also wouldn't fail to make an agreement because I distrust them.
Changing the way Soviets and Americans see one another through cultural exchanges could help improve the atmosphere for an arms control dialogue.
I think contacts between people, it's very important. And these contacts might contribute to the negotiations on the top level.
Peace is really going to come not when governments negotiate it, but when people stand up and say, this is exactly what we want and we're going to get it, or you're out of office.
Still, fundamental differences between the two societies are not likely to disappear.
There have been times in the past 7 years since Reagan took over that I thought we were on the verge of war. And it may very well be that just as things look so good now and look so bad then, they could, in a few months' time, look bad again.
No matter what our common interests with the Soviets, which I think will grow, we will continue to have a conflict with them. And the challenge really is not can we deal with the Soviets, which was a basic question for Americans, is to realize that we have no choice but to deal with them.
We all would like to see the day when we were no longer required and we could turn swords into plowshares.
I'm not going to see that in my lifetime. I doubt if any of us will see it in our lifetimes.
Even our most accomplished ideologues, if they survive, are not going to be able to tell the ashes of communism from the ashes of capitalism.
Today's children, though they know the danger of the arms race, also face the difficulty of ending it. They have inherited a future changed forever by the creators of the atom bomb.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Here are some stories we're following at CNN International. The superpower summit is now history. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev left the United States Thursday evening, saying his 3 days of talks with Ronald Reagan were the start of a new era in U.S.-Soviet relations. Gorbachev said he and President Reagan made, quote, significant progress towards cutting superpower nuclear arsenals in half. The Soviet leader said he was hopeful about completing the deal at a Moscow summit next year. In Seoul, South Korea, thousands of radicals hurled rocks, firebombs, and tear gas at government candidate Roh Tae-woo Thursday in what was one of the most violent outbursts yet in the presidential campaign. Finally, Nobel Peace Prize recipient Oscar Arias accepted his award in Oslo, Norway Thursday, saying he was, quote, grateful for the recognition of our search for peace. I'm Chris Johnson, CNN International.
I'm Kara McGinnis reporting for CNN International Weather. At last report in London under partly cloudy skies, the temperature at the freezing mark, 32 degrees 0 Celsius. It's foggy in Barcelona and 48 degrees 9 Celsius. Moscow has been reporting snow for the last several days, and it continues to snow. It's only 16 degrees Fahrenheit, 9 below Celsius. Heavy rain reported around Naples in the past 24 hours. It's continuing to rain, 45 degrees 7 Celsius. And cloudy skies in Tunis, 55 degrees, 13 Celsius. Helsinki reporting snow and 21 degrees Fahrenheit, 6 below Celsius. Some other temperatures reported across Europe. In Athens, 56 degrees, Warsaw, 35, Berlin, 40 degrees, and Dublin is reporting 38. I'm Kara McGinnis reporting for CNN International Weather.
This is Sandy Kenyon with the Hollywood Minute. Residents of Chillicothe, Ohio have waited a long time, but next week they finally get to see John Cougar Mellencamp perform in their town. More than 6,000 people signed a petition asking the rock star to do a concert there, but for years he couldn't work it into his schedule. On Wednesday, Mellencamp will do 2 shows for his fans, and as a Christmas present, he'll do them for free. He said, quote, ever since I saw that petition, I've wanted to thank those people. This is Sandy Kenyon with the Hollywood Minute.
It was a dazzling premiere in New York this week for comedian Robin Williams' newest film, Good Morning Vietnam. As Cheryl Washington tells us, this war movie is anything but ordinary.
The New York premiere of Robin Williams' latest film, Good Morning Vietnam, attracted celebrities and friends of the comic turned actor. Unlike other Vietnam films of late, Good Morning Vietnam focuses less on combat and more on the lighter side of soldiers behind the lines. The movie stars Williams as a zany morning disc jockey on the Armed Forces Radio Network in Saigon. His character comes closer to his own personality than any other role Williams has played in a film.
Good morning, Vietnam! Wow! I feel good. Time to rocket from the Delta to the DMZ.
It's 0600. What's the O stand for?
Oh my God. Following the screening, a party was hosted at the 21 Club where Williams talked about how DJs influenced the 60s.
The people I used to listen to when I was growing up was Wolfman Jack, so that would have been a different broadcast.
Baby, coming in from Saigon now. Here we go, XCRB.
So I couldn't really use his voice. It's been done. And plus also the stations I grew up listening to in Detroit were mainly soul stations, you know. Here's for you right now. It's a little number 5 dynamo. Please funkify for us now. So it'll be a different broadcast, baby. You know what I'm saying.
Already, early reports indicate Good Morning Vietnam could transform Williams from a comic to serious actor with a potential Oscar nomination. And what does he say about that?
Yeah, right, yeah. And then there's Jack going, not while I'm around, Sparky. You haven't got much of a chance, not when they see it. No, I don't know. You can't worry about that. You can't think about it. And you certainly can't expect it. Because if you do, they always go, nope.
He's read unofficial news.
Ethel Merman jams Russian radar.
Hello, I've got a feeling.
What's he going to be like in 6 months?
Big dogs landing on my face.
What's he going to be like when he's 10 times as popular?
Good Morning Vietnam opens in some areas later this month and wider in January. Cheryl Washington, CNN, New York.
That's our news. Thank you for joining us. I'm David Goodnow. This is Headline News.